Yeah, wow. I mean, in some ways, it's obviously a decade ago, but it seems like yesterday. My kids, who are now in high school, but were in first and second grade that day on 9/11 back in 2001. And my wife had actually gone into work early, so I was sitting in our kitchen, getting our two kids to finish up their food before they went off to school that morning. We're a block and a half from Roosevelt Elementary School. And remember, we had the TV on like we often did over the top of the refrigerator, and I'd flipped on the news. And I remember watching that day, one of the networks had immediately gone to image of and mentioned the plane had just hit one of the World Trade Centers, and it was like, whoa! And I looked at it for a second, and I realized this is not good. Turned off the TV, ran around to the living room on the other side, turned the TV on, got on the phone right away with my wife, and said, "Oh my gosh, you gotta turn on the TV at work. Something wild is happening here. I can't believe what's happening." And then, not long after that, because this would have been a little before 8 Central Time, then they started showing the footage of the second plane having gone in, and it was just, surreal. You didn't know what was happening. And so still thinking it was something in New York, not really, obviously years later, understanding how significant it was. I talked to my wife, watched a little longer, and then realized, man, I need to get the kids to school. And so took the kids down to school. They're in first and second grade. Took off. I was in the state legislature at that time. I used to carpool every day. And I still remember being literally by Delafield, by the exit, by where the old Smiley Face barn used to be, where the Amish barn is now. And I remember, I think I was listening to WTMJ radio, and they said that one of the buildings was coming down. And me and the other guys in the carpool kind of thought, buildings coming. It was like, okay, something must have fallen off in like one of these 4 or 5 story buildings nearby. And they were explaining almost as really, I mean, I think it was John Jago, somebody on TMJ radio was talking about this, and it was, you heard him say it, but we couldn't believe it. None of us could believe it. He just kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the building's coming down." And so we were all kind of in a daze on the way over. Went to the Capitol, eventually went back, and like everybody in America, didn't know what to do, and just kept watching the images over and over again. That was horrific. I remember feeling scared and talking to my wife and wanting to get back to where our kids were and getting back together. The only up part about that whole week was, I think that was, if I remember right, it was a Tuesday. By Friday, the president at that time had asked people to go out on their steps at 7 o'clock and light a candle. And our kids going to Roosevelt Elementary School, I think my wife had mentioned that we were going to do that to some of the other parents. And I remember at about 5:45 that night, my parents had come over, the kids had found a box of old candles, and we went out in the front porch and thought maybe somebody'd come over. And there were like 30 or 40 people in our front yard. We didn't know what to do, so we all lit our candles. We stood around in a circle and sang "God Bless America" and a couple other patriotic songs. And then my dad, who was a retired minister, said a prayer. And I just, years later, I still remember, I mean, it kind of sends chills up my back thinking about it, but I always want, as much as I want my kids never to forget the buildings coming down and the horror of 9/11, more importantly, I want to remember that Friday when our neighborhood, like neighborhoods across the country, came together, and remember that was more powerful than the buildings themselves. I wish you could harness it, because it was the sort of thing where people it didn't matter party affiliation, it didn't matter whether you were the city or you lived on a farm. People were just united. And you drive by the signs that, I mean, we even had up on I remember I'd suggested to DOT at the time to put up on those traffic signs that told you about, to just put United We Stand. Just all these small ways of reminding people that we were together. And obviously out of something so horrific, the good that came out of that, at least for a while, was that people were united. We were united as Americans, and really around the world. You watch the images of people thinking about what had happened, thinking about the victims, remembering us here in the United States. And it was an amazing sense of unity that I don't think we've had anything close to since then. I mean, obviously in times of crisis, you tend to bond together no matter what, whether it's a small town or in this case, a whole country, an entire world. But I hope a little bit of that, that's why I remind my kids every 9/11, I talk about it, of how everybody got together and brought those candles out, because they'll never forget the buildings coming down, because those images are out there and they're the kind of things you wake up in the middle of the night, in a nightmare about. I hope they always remember the faces, the candlelight images on the faces of all the kids and parents that stood around that Friday night, and remember that triumph, that was bigger, that was more important. We could have lived in fear, but in the end, we chose to be united.